The blue zones and a plant-based diet. I am excited to dive into this topic today. If you guys are new here, my name is Chloe, and I suffered through multiple eating disorders growing up. One of those eating disorders was orthorexia. If you don't know what orthorexia is, I have a couple other videos where I talk more about it, and so you can go and watch them. In the link below, you can find those specific videos. Orthorexia, pretty much though, is a fixation on clean eating, on healthy eating. One will become very anxious, very upset, very irritable, feel very, guilty and ashamed if they eat something that they do not deem to be healthy. Now, in our society, it's like, what's wrong with that, right? Again, I'm not saying that eating healthy is bad, but when we take it to an obsessive, very extreme kind of level, that's when it can be very harmful for our health, both physically and mentally. So again, make sure you go and watch those videos. Now, I'm excited to talk about this specific topic today because I previously was vegan for about 5 years. And something that I used to strengthen my thesis of veganism was this idea of the blue zones and the fact that they ate a plant-based diet. So for those of you guys who aren't aware of what the blue zones are, let's just quickly give you a synopsis. So the blue zones are these places around the world, there are 5 in particular, that have some of the longest living people. So people living all the way up into, the age of 100, 101, 105, I think 106 might have been the oldest, but they're living very long lives with very low disease. So very low heart disease, very low cancer rates, very low diabetes. And so there's been a lot of research or a lot of talk about why these people are so healthy. How is it that these people are living to the age of 105? So first off, let's discuss where these blue zones are. We have the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, we have Sardinia, Italy, we have Okinawa, Japan, have Ikaria, Greece, and Loma Linda, California, specifically the Seventh-day Adventist in Loma Linda, California. And so there's been a couple books and 10, talks about it and articles and things discussing the blue zones. And the blue zones have always been touted as plant-based communities. And when I was vegan, I used this idea of these people who are living until, they're 105, they're eating a plant-based diet. Like, wow, this is amazing. It must be the plant-based diet that is the most healthiest. And so this video is here to talk about this because I know a lot of you guys are coming from a plant-based diet, or you are currently vegan or thinking about leaving veganism, or being plant-based or vegetarian. And I know that a lot of you guys read things like this, or you learn about things like this, and you kind of grab onto it and it's like, see, yes, the people in Okinawa, Japan, they're eating a plant-based diet. Plant-based diet must be healthy, so that means I should eat a plant-based diet. That means meat is bad. Now, the person who really did all the studies about this and really came out with the book on the blue zones was Dan Buettner. And he really portrayed these blue zones to be plant-based. That was like the big thing that he said that they all had in common, right? Is that they ate a plant-based diet. So I really want to dive into this today because I know that a lot of you guys are struggling with orthorexia. So again, that fixation on right eating, correct eating, clean eating. And it's really blocking you in your recovery. And a lot of you guys are drawn to my channel because you are vegan and you're dealing with like amenorrhea and you're dealing with hair loss and brain fog and all these like negative symptoms. And yet you still think that veganism is like the way to eat, and you're holding on to that. And so I think that this is a really important conversation to have because holding on to such a strong belief like this can block you from your recovery because you are blocking your intuition. You're blocking what your body's clearly saying. If you don't have a period, if you have all the signs of a low metabolic rate, which if you are not sure what that is, you can go to my website and you can download a free little guide. It's a free little checklist to just see where your metabolism is at. So make sure you go to www.flowwithchlo.com. That is also linked down below in the bio. So if you're having all these negative health symptoms, it might be time to take a step back and understand that maybe you've been a little bit misguided. And I think it's easy to be misguided in this world because we have anyone and everyone saying what they believe about nutrition, and we have all these articles and books and YouTube videos and podcasts and things like that saying what it is that you should eat. I try and be very careful and never tell someone what to eat. I always, always, always want to promote people having food freedom so that they can eat everything and eat a balance of everything, and then from there go and choose what really works for them. Some people are going to work really well with having like a high dairy intake. That's me. I'm French. I love eating dairy. For some people, it doesn't really settle well with their stomach. That's okay. We don't need to be obsessive about it. We don't need to now put labels on ourselves of I'm vegan or I'm dairy free or anything. We can just simply understand what works well for our body. So I am always preaching that. I don't think that there's one way to eat. And that's kind of my one issue here, is that the blue zones are really saying like, hey, this is the way to eat. Look at what they're eating. And now there's so many diet books, that are in conjunction with the blue zone diet, and it's become this whole thing now. So I wanted to talk about it because I think we're being very misled when it comes to the blue zones and understanding what it is that they actually ate. Now, I went to university to study public health, and of course blue zones came up in many of my classes, and it actually was really like perplexing to me at the time, especially because I was vegan, to learn that they're not as plant-based as they're making it seem.
And the thing that has perplexed me the most is that when we look into the research, it seems to look like Dan Buettner cherry-picked a lot of the information that he put into his articles and books on the blue zones. I read an article debunking a lot of the myths about the blue zones, and in it, the author said this.
Anyway, it's not hard to find examples outside of the blue zones that are plant-based while extremely unhealthy. An example is India. Or meat-based while extremely healthy. An example, Maasai. Hong Kong has the world's highest meat consumption and the highest life expectancy. The people of India eat little meat and have a high rate of cardiovascular disease.
So the whole notion that this is better than this is completely unfounded when we look at the fact that there are many, many, many civilizations and communities of people out there that are extraordinarily healthy and yet eat tons of animal products. And this is where it becomes interesting, because when we look at the blue zones and we look at the diet that they were actually eating, it's not as plant-based as Dan Buettner made it seem. In fact, as we will dive into shortly, these communities thrived and ate animal foods.
So let's dive into each of these 5 blue zones to see what it is that they are actually eating and if it truly is a plant-based diet or not. Now, I would actually like to start with the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. And I want to start with this one because I grew up part-time in Costa Rica ever since the age of like 8 to 18. I was there around 3 to 4, sometimes even 5 months a year. So I've spent a lot of time in Costa Rica, and I've spent a lot of time in the Nicoya Peninsula. And so I just want to share my observation here for this one. We're going to dive into studies and other things for all the other blue zones, but this one I simply just want to share my little 2 cents here. Costa Ricans are not vegetarian. And the Nicoya Peninsula is not different from any other part of Costa Rica as far as what they are eating. Now, my family and I have many native Costa Rican friends who have invited us over for dinner many, many times. And we live in like the middle of Costa Rica in these small little communities. And what's really cool, first off, is that a lot of them live with their family. And we're going to talk about this later on, but grandma is there and aunts are there, mama's there, babies are there, kids are there. It's kind of like multi-generational in these households. And again, let me just say they eat meat. I'm remembering this one time when we went over to our one family friend's house, and they literally went in their backyard and they killed their chicken for us. Plucked it, drained it, plucked it, put it in a big pot with spices and water and, you know, carrots and onions and potatoes and things like that. And a couple hours later, we had dinner, and it was definitely not a vegetarian or a plant-based meal. Something that I've noticed with Costa Ricans is that they love to cook in lard. Now, I'm not talking about in the restaurants. Sometimes it's a little bit different, but when you go to a true native Costa Rican household, you are going to see a big Tupperware of lard in the kitchen. That's what they cook with. They cook with tons of lard. That's what helps makes everything nice and crispy. That's what helps give everything a lot of good flavor. So if you're cooking chicken, you're going to throw in a bunch of lard into the pan, and then you're going to cook your chicken in that lard. They also eat tons of fish. Ceviche is literally like one of their main dishes, and it is a raw fish dish that they cook in lime juice, and they usually serve with some sort of crackers. You'll see people coming out of the ocean in their boats at like 5 a.m. and they have huge tunas and just like other types of fish that they caught that morning. So they eat tons of fish, guys. Eggs, there are chickens everywhere in Costa Rica, literally everywhere. They walk around in people's yards, they walk around on the street, in the middle of the street, they walk around through, like, if you're sitting at a restaurant, you'll oftentimes will have like a chicken or two run through. Chickens are everywhere, and they're not everywhere for no reason. They're not just having them because they're pets, guys. They're eating the eggs. They are killing them for meat. And so this idea that the people in Nicoya Peninsula are plant-based is really not true in my experience. It's actually because I was vegan for multiple years and I still would go and travel to Costa Rica. One of my biggest fears at that time would be traveling to Costa Rica because it was so hard to find vegetarian or completely vegan options at restaurants. Like very, very hard. I would have to have them make like an arroz con camarones, which is like a shrimp rice dish minus the shrimp. And even that, I know that they cooked the rice in lard. I know that I wasn't being fully vegan because it really is nearly impossible because they eat a lot of animal products. Now, let's step away from the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica and let's fly all the way over to Okinawa, Japan. This is the place that is touted to be very, very, very plant-based and to eat a ton of sweet potatoes. So let's dive into this. Is this true? Now, it's important to understand that the blue zones were studied post-World War II. And so the diet that people were eating back then in post-World War II era was radically different than what they were eating previously. If you read here in this article, it says, many of the populations that lived as seen in studies after World War II often were populations that ate higher amounts and certainly higher quality of meat and animal fat prior to the war, a not insignificant detail. It's important to not only know what people have been eating when older, but also what they were eating during their developmental years and considering epigenetics, what their parents and grandparents were eating. Weston A. Price studied some of these populations in the pre-war period. In every traditional society he visited, they included animal foods as central to their diets. The ravages of war disrupted many traditional diets, including those later studied in the post-war period by Ansel Keys and others. It turns out that looking at a population following the most destructive war in world history, not to mention decades of military occupation, might not be representative of what is historically normal to the conditions and lifestyle prior to the war. And the elderly who had such long lives after the war, of course, grew up eating that pre-war diet. And now, when we take a look at what they were eating pre-war period, we'll find that just like the Nicoya Peninsula, they were eating a lot of lard and did most of their cooking in lard. According to gerontologist Kazukiyo Teruya, the most common cooking fat used traditionally in Okinawa is a monosaturated fat, lard. Historically, the pig population of Okinawa was very high, reaching 110,000 pigs. That is one pig per every 6 people before World War II. Tragically, the devastation of the war cut the Okinawan population almost in half and destroyed most of their food supply. The pork population was cut down almost 90% to just 14,000. You may have heard that the Okinawan has nearly 70% of calories coming from purple sweet potato and just 3% from saturated fat. But the survey that found this was conducted in 1949 when people were still struggling to avoid starvation in the aftermath of the war. However, just 14 years after the war, the Okinawan pig population surpassed its previous highs, reaching 142,000 in 1960. Now, people don't just have pigs for the sake of having pigs, guys. They have pigs for the sake of using them for food. A quote from this article says, Buettner cherry-picks and ignores areas that have both high consumption of animal products and high life expectancies, like Hong Kong, Switzerland, Spain, and Australia. He also doesn't mention that the lifespan of Japan has gone up with increased meat intake, while the lifespan of Okinawa has gone down with reduced meat intake. Hong Kong residents reach an average lifespan of 85 years on a diet with an average amount of 1.5 pounds of meat per day. Also, Hong Kong has the highest average IQ. I've always thought that my brain power and my ability to speak, my ability to think, has radically improved ever since incorporating animal products back into my diet. Brain fog and cognitive decline is really something that a lot of vegans and vegetarians alike have issues with. So while the book made it seem like in Okinawa, Japan, they didn't eat a lot of pork, it really just is not true. They have so many pork dishes, and they are cooking in lard, and they are eating eggs, and they are incorporating animal products. So Dan Buettner made it seem like they eat a very, very, very small amount of meat, but that is simply not the case. Yes, they do have sweet potatoes, but sweet potato consumption was increased simply due to the post-war starvation time that they were in. Now, when Dan Buettner went to Okinawa, he met a man who was 105 years old, and his name was, and I have to look, it was Toku. And Toku mentioned to Dan that he liked to eat fish every single day. Does that fall in line with eating a 95% plant-based diet, eating fish every single day, cooking your food in lard, having multiple meals that are abundant in pork products? It doesn't sound like the Okinawans are as plant-based as we think them to be. In fact, local menus offer boiled pig's feet, tail soup, and shredded ears. Pork is cooked in a mixture of soy sauce, ginger, kelp, and small amounts of sugar, then sliced and chopped up for stir-fried dishes. So now let's travel on to Sardinia, Italy, where again Dan Buettner met a very robust, healthy 75-year-old man who happened to be in the middle of slaughtering a cow when he met him. Again, these places aren't as plant-based as we deem them to be. So let's dive into what Sardinians are really truly eating. And when we look into it, we find that Sardinians are eating a lot of sheep. They're eating a lot of sheep's cheese, a lot of milk. They are eating a lot of animal products. It's a big base of their meals. And yes, they eat olive oil, but again, they eat all these other things as well. Now, I actually have a friend who lived with us for 3.5 years who happens to be from Sardinia, Italy. Her name is Valentina, and she is like the cutest little Italian woman you'll ever meet. Now, Valentina did a lot of cooking for us, and it was great. It was delicious. It was yummy, and it 1000% was not plant-based. In fact, I was, again, vegan at that time when she lived with us, and she really hated cooking for me because I was so picky with everything. I was like, no, I can't have cheese on that. I don't want any meat. I don't want cooked in any like duck fat or lard or anything. And she would get really frustrated because she's like, you can't cook without those things. And she cooked very, very, very traditional Italian food. I'm talking about she literally would make homemade pasta for us like every single meal. And you know what? Her pasta had eggs in it. It had lots of eggs in it. And she utilized a lot of various different meats and seafoods and things like that. She used a lot of cheese too, and yes, oh my gosh, she used a lot of olive oil, like literally would just like pour like the whole bottle of olive oil over like a bunch of beets boiling in a pot, right? And she was like, this is what makes it taste so good. And that was the cuisine that her mom taught her to, make. And that was the cuisine that her mom's mom taught her mom to make. And it has been passed down, this type of cooking, for generations and generations. So while Dan Buettner really talked about the amount of olive oil that they used, you can't say that they're plant-based just because they eat a lot of olive oil. They're eating a lot of olive oil in conjunction with a lot of other animal products, cheese being a huge one of them. So now let's actually go to Icaria, Greece. And I want to have you guys listen to this nutritionist, Mary Reddick, who did a beautiful video on the myths of the blue zones. And she, in this video, is in Greece, and she is really trying to analyze what it is that they eat and trying to debunk this myth that they are plant-based. And I think she does a great job at succeeding in that.
We had to come after spending so much time in Greece because I had a feeling that they didn't eat the way that people say that they eat. Traditionally, if you read any of the Blue Zone books or watch any of the videos, it's all vegetables and beans. And the Greeks don't actually eat like that. They eat a lot of everything. So we came to Icaria and we were not surprised. Our first restaurant here is a 120-year-old restaurant. And on the menu today, they're serving up pork liver, pig head stew, goat and lemon sauce. Now, they also serve bread, and they have a pasta dish, and then, of course, they've got their salads, specifically their horta, which is the wild greens, and one of my favorite dishes. The meal started with a big block of fried cheese, as is common here in Greece, the saganaki, and there's several other varieties as well, but that's what we had, and it was amazing. There's a lot of dairy on this island. Almost everyone we've met and everyone I've heard of has animals on their property for dairy, for meat, and for eggs, showing that this is not a plant-based diet. It's not an anything-based diet. They've got the carbohydrates, the 3-day fermented bread, they've got the meat that's local, nose to tail, and then, of course, they've got a lot of fat. Now, what's interesting in the Blue Zone book is that they do talk about how the Icarians, 50% of their calories come from fat, 25% of that coming from olive oil, the other 25, of course, from animal fat. That's going to be your butter, your cheese, the fat of the animal, these kind of things. But when they do the wheel of food and what percentage of food is represented in the diet, they completely miss the dairy aspect, and dairy is a huge staple here, specifically goat and sheep dairy. So I think as we continue our travels here in Icaria, we're going to continue to find more of this equal balancing of food, very high fat, meat with each meal. We've interviewed several people, and everyone has said they eat meat on a daily basis. These are not tourists. These are people that live here and have lived here generationally, their whole life, and their parents and their grandparents, and they eat meat every day. Now, this morning, I was reading over all the studies of the Icarian diet, and it was fascinating because there wasn't a segment on any of the food questionnaires for the Icarians on dairy or on chicken, pork, lamb, and goat, and these are some of their mostly consumed foods. They were completely omitted from all the studies I've found, making it appear as though they just eat red meat once to twice a week, which is true. They don't eat a lot of beef here. This is not a beef-friendly island. The cattle really can't live well on this terrain. This is more for sheep and lamb and goats. And you can really see it in all the menus. So as I look at this menu here, most of the appetizers are meat-based. You have chicken with sauce, sauteed pork, meatballs with yogurt dip, several different kinds of fried cheeses, tzatziki, which is a wonderful yogurt dish. And then you've got all the main dishes, which are all meat-based and seafood. Everything from fried whole fish to pork belly to hamburger stuffed with cheese, of all things. And that's actually quite common here. So you can really see, even with the salads, a lot of the salads have meat or definitely dairy in them as well, and those are considered more of a side dish and appetizer. So from this, you can really see it's not a plant-based diet here at all. And I think we got the misperception that it was a plant-based diet because of things lacking on the food questionnaires given to the Icarians.
So I love that Mary didn't just read the Blue Zone book and be like, oh, okay, they, don't eat any meat. But she literally went to Greece and was like, well, I'm going to go to these restaurants. I'm going to talk to the locals. I'm going to talk to the older generation, the people that are 90 and 100 years old. And I'm going to ask them, what did you eat growing up and what do you eat now? So now let's go all the way to California to look at the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda. This is what's fascinating. So the book really pinpointed, Seventh-day Adventists are so healthy because they're vegetarian and they have a longer lifespan than most Americans, right? But what's interesting is that they didn't include in the whole blue zones the Mormons. The Mormons in California and in Utah and everywhere else, but they specifically looked, in the study I looked at, they specifically looked at the California and the Utah Mormons. They have just as long as the lifespan as the Seventh-day Adventist. Now, I grew up and I was raised Mormon, so I am very familiar with Mormon culture, and trust me, we have so many barbecues, we eat tons of cheese, we eat simply just like any other American. So while they abstain from coffee, they abstain from alcohol, they're not abstaining from meat, they're not abstaining even from sugar or any of that, and yet they have a longer lifespan, just as much so as the vegetarians with the Loma Linda community. And so you can't say that it's the meat, especially because when we look into the statistics of it, only nearly 30% of Seventh-day Adventists are purely vegetarian. Now, yes, while you're on campus, their cafeteria is only serving vegetarian food, but that doesn't mean that everyone is eating vegetarian food at home. In fact, a lot of them are eating animal products. And the ones that are vegetarian, well, vegetarian, you can eat eggs and you can't eat dairy. So they're getting a lot of animal products in, just not any red meat and things like that. What I really want to bring this all down to is the fact that when we really look at what these communities were eating, we really do find that they are eating animal products and they aren't as plant-based as the Blue Zone diet likes to make them seem, right? But also I wanted to talk about, okay, why are these people living longer? And I think that this is such a beautiful conversation to have. What truly makes someone healthy? And when we look at the commonalities between all these different places, there are multiple things that they have in common. They have natural movement, they garden, they walk, they have a sense of purpose in their life. They have a great sense of community. They have great stress relievers, community and having support from others being one of those stress relievers. A lot of them have spirituality, so some form of, religion, or they're part of a faith-based community. And these are the things that are making them healthy. And so we're nitpicking them for their diets, going they eat sweet potatoes, so now I should only eat sweet potatoes, right? Instead of looking at, no, how did they set up their life? Oh, they have good family connections. Oh, they have a great community. They have good friends. They have lots of nature time. They do light movement. Maybe those are the things that we should be paying attention to and trying to emulate, and not the exact things that they are eating. So I just wanted to make this video because I know how easy it is to grab onto this idea of, oh my gosh, they're saying that this is the healthiest way to eat, and look, it's all plant-based. Okay, well, welcome to the world of cherry-picking science. And like I said, I have experience of living in Costa Rica. I have lived with an Italian. Mary literally went to Greece, and we have research and pictures and writings from Dr. A. Price, who looked at these communities before Ansel Keys and Dan Buettner went there with their agenda of wanting to see a certain thing, and that is a plant-based diet. So you guys know my whole perspective on a plant-based diet, especially if you were going through eating disorder recovery or amenorrhea recovery. I don't think that it is sustainable, or that it is really going to be something that is fruitful for one's health. And debunking this myth that all these people living to 100 years old are abstaining from meat is hopefully something that helps you understand, oh, So if the 105-year-old is eating meat and drinking her goat's milk and eating tons of cheese and wine and doing all that, maybe I've got it wrong. Kind of just sometimes have to hand it over to the generation above us and learn from their wisdom. And I definitely look at my grandma, who is French, and I just glean so much wisdom from her and how she eats. She's very traditional French food. It's very balanced. They're not cutting out anything, like she was saying about in Greece. They eat the bread, they're eating the rice, but they're also eating the cheese, and they're eating meat, and they're eating poultry, they're eating all these things. And so I think at the end of the day, it's just balance, balance, balance when it comes to your food choices, and not getting caught up in all these fad diets out there, and they say to eat this and they say to eat that. Stop with that. Just eat a balance of everything, and I really think that that is the way to assure that you are staying healthy and strong. So thanks for listening to this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.